Okay, so these are the problems I have picked for today, and today's video is for week 3, day 2. So let's look at problem 1, and the directions are to solve for x, and we have the equation, the absolute value of 4x minus 12 is equal to 16. So before I solve this, I'd just like to list a few facts about what we call the absolute value. So we have facts about absolute value x. So these double lines are called the absolute value. So if you take double line x, that means absolute value of x. So the first fact we have, let's call it fact A, is if you just take the absolute value of a positive number, it's the positive number. So we take, for example, absolute value 5, that's 5. So the absolute value of positive number is a positive number. The second fact is if you take the absolute value of a negative number, you get the positive. So absolute value of minus 5, you get the positive 5. So fact B is absolute value of a negative is a positive. And fact C, so these are just two general facts that you can use. Fact C will help us solve this problem. And that's if you have the absolute value of a number, let's say x, is equal to something like c, and c is greater than or equal to 0. Then what we have is we have two solutions. We have the x can be positive c, or x can be a negative c. This is the fact we're going to use to solve problem 1. And the third fact I'd like to list is if you have the absolute value equal to a negative number. So for example, let's say it's equal to a negative 5. Then there is no solution. The absolute value can never be a negative number. No solution. So fact D is that absolute value can never be negative. Okay, so we're going to use fact C, which says if you have the absolute value of something equal to a positive, then the something in the absolute value is either this number or it's negative. We can replace x with anything. So in this case, we're going to have, instead of an x, a 4x minus 12. So using fact C, we have that 4x minus 12, it's an x here, is equal to a 16. When we have 4x minus 12 is equal to a minus 16. In this problem, the value c is the 16, and the x is the 4x minus 12. So basically, to solve this equation, we just need to solve these two equations here. So for the one on the left, I'm going to add 12. So we cross out the plus and the minus 12. We get 4x is equal to 28, since 16 plus 12 is 28. And now we divide by 4 on both sides. So we have 4x over 4 is just a 1x. And 28 divided by 4 is 7. So our first solution is we have x equals 7. For the second solution, again, we add 12 to both sides. So the minus and positive cancel. And on the left, where we have just a 4x. And on the right, we'll have a minus 16 plus 12. That's equal to a minus 4. And so finally, we just divide both sides by 4. So we have 4x over 4. That just cancels to 1. So an x. And minus 4 over 4 is a minus 1. So our second solution is x equals minus 1. So we have our two answers are 7 and minus 1. Okay, let's move to problem 2. The directions are to solve for u. And we have the equation 5 times the absolute value of u minus 2 is equal to a minus 55. So what we want to do is just eliminate any number that isn't in the absolute value. So we need to get rid of the 5. To do this, we just divide both sides by 5. So I'm going to divide the left by 5, and I'm going to divide the right by 5. Dividing the left by 5, we have a 5 in the numerator and denominator, so we can cancel these out. They cancel to 1. So on the left, we have a u minus 2. U minus 2. And on the right, we have a minus 55 divided by 5. That's equal to a negative 11. So which rule do we use? Is we go back here, and we notice that the value of the absolute value is negative. So this is D. We have the absolute value of something is a negative. And by fact D, we have that there must be no solution, since the absolute value can never be negative. So what we have here is because the right side is negative, there's no solution. So that solves problem 2, that there's no solution. Let's move on to problem 3. Just more variations of the previous problems. Our directions are to solve for x, and we're given the equation. The absolute value of x minus 2 minus 12 is equal to minus 12. Like problem 2, we want to isolate the absolute value on one side. To isolate the absolute value, we want to get rid of this minus 12. So I'm going to add 12 to both sides. So plus 12 and the plus 12. So what we have is we have a minus 12 plus 12. That's a 0. So we have minus x, or x minus 2 plus a 0. So these cancel. And on the left, we just have x minus 12 absolute value. And on the right, we have minus 12 plus 12, which is 0. So we have the absolute value of x minus 12 equals 0. And by the facts that we listed, this is part of fact C, since C can be 0 here. So our solution, we just said the inside, to find our solution, we just said the inside number equal to 0. So we're just going to say x minus 12 equal to 0. And so we add 12 to both sides. The minus 12 and positive 12 cancel. And so we just have x on the left. And on the right, we have 0 plus 12, that's 12. I'm sorry, my mistake. This should be a 2. So we have x minus 2 here. And then you add the 2. And so you get x equals 2. Right, so this absolute value x minus 2. So when you add the 2's cancel. You have a 0 plus 2 and get x equals 2. Okay, let's look at the final example, which is just slightly more complicated than example 3, just a few more algebraic steps. We have the equation 4 times the absolute value of 2w minus 6 plus 9 is equal to 73. So we want to isolate the absolute value. So we need to get rid of this 9 and the 4. So first we're going to get rid of the 9. So I'm going to subtract a 9 on both sides. So we have a 9 minus 9, that gives a 0. So these can cancel. So we're left with 4 times the absolute value of 2w minus 6 on the left. And on the right, we have 73 minus 9. 73 minus 9 is equal to a 64. Now we take a 4 times the absolute value of 2w minus 6 is equal to 64. We want to get rid of the 4. So we're going to divide both sides by 4. And so on the left, the 4/4 is just a 1, so you can get rid of these. And we're just left with the 2w minus 6 absolute value. So we have absolute value 2w minus 6. And 64/4 is equal to 16. And so just very quickly, we're going to go over to the facts I listed. And so the fact we want to use here is C, that the absolute value of a number is positive, then the inside part of the absolute value is equal to either the positive or negative of this number C. So we're going to use that rule. And so we have the two possible equations are that 2w minus 6 is a 16, or 2w minus 6 is a minus 16. And so we want to add a, so let's solve the first equation on the left. We want to add a 6. The minus and positive 6 cancel to a 0. And so we have a 2w is equal to, and the 16 plus 6 is 22. And now to solve for w, we divide by 2 on the left and the right. The 2w over 2 is just a w. And the 22 over 2 is equal to 11. So we have for our first solution is w equals 11. Now for the answer or the problem on the right, we have 2w minus 6 is a minus 16. Go through the same process. We're going to add a 6 to both sides. The minus and the positive 6 add to 0. So on the left, we just have a 2w. And on the right, we have a minus 16 plus 6, which is equal to a minus 10. And so to solve for w, we divide by 2. And so we have 2w over 2 is a w since the 2's cancel. And we have minus 10 over 2 is a minus 5. For our solutions to problem 4, we have w equals 11 and w equals minus 5. Now I'm going to show you the problems I picked for the extra practice. So I picked 3 problems today. This is going to be your attendance problem number 1. Solve for w. You have the equation absolute value 3w minus 9 equals 12. And I went ahead and listed the answers you'll get so you can just be sure of them. And so your answers should be a w equals 7 and minus 1. And I chose 2 extra problems you can practice if you'd like. And so we have problem 2 is to solve for x. The absolute value of 2x plus 14 equals minus 4. And problem 3 is to solve for v. 2 times the absolute value of v minus 6 plus 12 is equal to 32. So you can go ahead and work on these. If you get stuck on problems 2 and 3, you can continue watching the video and check your answer with mine, because I'm going to go through the solutions to these. Okay, to problem 2. Hopefully you have tried it. We're going to go through the same rules as we have been. And so our first step to solve this problem is to isolate the absolute value. So we need to get rid of this positive 14. Then my first step is going to be subtract the 14 from both sides of this equation. And so on the left, we have a 14 minus a 14. These will cancel to 0. So we are just left with the absolute value of 2x. And on the right, we have a minus 4 minus a 14, which is equal to a minus 28. And so we have, minus 18 is a absolute value equal to a negative number. And you know from before that if an absolute value is equal to a negative number, there is no solution. So our answer for number 2 is that there is no solution because the right-hand side of the equation is negative. So let's work on problem 3. We have 2 times the absolute value of v minus 6 plus 12 is equal to 32. And so this is like problem 4 from the previous examples. So we want to get rid of this 12 and the 2. So first I'm going to subtract the 12 from the left and the right. So just crossing these out, we have 12 and minus 12 cancel to 0. So on the left, we just have a 2 times the absolute value, v minus 6. On the right, we have a 32 minus 12. That's equal to 20. And so we have 2 absolute value v minus 6 equals 20. We want to get rid of this 2, so I'm going to divide both sides by 2. The 2 on the left, on the numerator and the denominator cancel, so we just have a v minus 6 absolute value. And on the right, we have 20 divided by 2, which is 10. And so we're going to use the rule that if absolute value of something is equal to a positive number, then you can set the inside equal to the positive or negative of this number. So we just need to solve v minus 6 equals 10, or v minus 6 equals minus 10, negative 10. So once we solve these, we have our answer. So to solve the one on the left, v minus 6 equals 10, we just add a 6 to both sides. The positive and negative 6 cancel. So on the left, we have a v, and on the right, we have a 10 plus 6, which is 16. Now the equation on the right can be solved the same way. We add a 6 to both sides. The minus 6 and the positive 6 cancel. So we just have a v on the left. And on the right, we have a minus 10 plus 6 is a minus 4. This gives our 2 solutions to problem 3, which are v equals 16 and v equals minus 4. So this ends the examples I have picked for this video.